Recording. All right. Thanks for being here. We're at about 100 strong, which is great. Good to be with you all, and super excited to be here with the Juno team. We've partnered with Juno on last year's MBA week and another event, and they really are the experts when it comes to financing your MBA. So super excited to learn from Nikhil. I went to Stanford, and a ton of my class, obviously you can see here, 40% of students use Juno. So, they work with a number of students. So I know many of you have already been admitted. Others of you are probably learning about financing your MBA. But definitely take advantage of Nikhil. He'll do some live Q&A. You can get all your questions answered. There's obviously a lot to know. And there's a lot of stress in this process, but there's definitely lots of great options. We're also doing a $500 scholarship that we will announce on this call. So go sign up through this link. We don't do these ever for our events, but we wanted to make sure we helped everyone that was concerned, or at least help one person who's concerned about paying for school through this scholarship. So make sure you sign up. You do need to create an account on Juno in order to be eligible, and then we will pass a name to Nikhil towards the end of the event, so that he has that name. So make sure you sign up through this link. We'll drop it in the chat as well, because I know we're now up to 113. We're getting a lot of people trickling in. Yeah, definitely very excited to have Nikhil here. So with that, I will stop sharing and kick it over to you, Nikhil.
Awesome. John, thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure to be here. And I could not, the last time we did this, the audience was so engaged, so many questions. I remember the ratio, it was close to 1:1. That means today we have 115 participants. I'm expecting 115 questions. Okay. No, I'm not kidding. That was the ratio. So I'm super excited. Let me kick things off over here. I'll share my screen. And the way we like to do these things, Diego is here with me. Diego's on the Juno team, super experienced. He basically has all the knowledge. He's been with us for years now. So as things come up, feel free to put them in the chat, okay? And what will happen is either Diego will prompt them towards me and say, hey, this is something appropriate for everyone to know about, or Diego will respond to you directly or in the chat and, sort of respond via chat, right? One way or the other, we want to make sure we get your questions answered as we do that. So, okay, we're going to chat about a few things. One thing I'll note is when we get to the loans section, okay, a lot of things I'm going to be talking about is eligible for people who are US citizens, US permanent residents, or international students with a US citizen/permanent resident cosigner. If you are an international student without a cosigner, number one advice is try to become an international student with a cosigner. But if that's not possible, no problem, reach out to us. There are options, happy to chat about them, just not discussing them in detail on this, in this slide deck. Okay. The disclaimer, right? I'm sure you're expecting this. We're not giving you advice, etc. I don't know your personal situation. This is broad reaching information. We'll, quick intro, we'll talk about budgeting, which is sort of a very crucial section that actually trips a lot of people up. That's why I like to start with that. Then we'll talk about student loans. I know that's where a lot of the questions flood in, and then we'll be doing Q&A for a bit. Okay. So who am I? Why am I here? I went to Illinois, did my aerospace engineering, had a lot of fun doing that, landed my dream job at Boeing. Please do not ask me about planes falling out of the sky right now. I don't know anything about that. Went to HBS, had a lot of fun over there and started Juno in the process of getting my own student loans. So this is what that start looked like, right? We were, we weren't using WhatsApp as much back then, but we basically said, hey, can we try a group negotiation for student loans? Surprisingly worked, right? I don't even know how it worked back then, but somehow it worked. And we ended up saving the average person around $14,000 per student per year on their student loans, which was phenomenal, right? And today that's grown to become sort of, the number one source for MBAs to get their student loans across all of the MBA programs, really. You saw the first slide. Actually, I should use the slide you have, John, with the actual percentages. I think that's better. But, strong double-digit percentages across all the schools. And that we crossed $1 billion. I don't know when I'm going to, February, as of February this year, we crossed $1 billion. So that was an exciting milestone. So what is Juno, right? It's really group negotiation for student loans. What we do is before Juno, Everyone would go shop around at different banks, get some rate, and sign whatever loan they get, right? After Juno, what we do is we aggregate the demand on the front end before you even need the loan, right? Then we go to the banks and say, hey, who's going to give us the best rates? Oh, and by the way, we want a rate that's better than what's on your website. We want a rate that's better than the federal loans, and we want a better rate than anything else out there. And lo and behold, some lenders agree. We'll talk about the reasons why later, but and that's what we bring to market for everyone. So that's Juno, that's me. Let's talk about budgeting. That's a super important topic. So why do we talk about budgeting? Well, the schools will give you some kind of a budget, right? It's called the cost of attendance, and say every school has a table that looks like this. Some of them may only publish the single the numbers for a single person, but in the back they do have numbers for various situations. But ultimately, these numbers often underestimate the median person's cost of attendance. And I chose my words very carefully here because I say median because, yes, there are some percentage of people who completely live within the budget published by the school. That being said, the majority of people spend more money than what the school estimates, right? And why is that? The school is really thinking about, okay, what do you need for the academic experience? However, MBA programs often are a lot more than just the academic experience. And when you start taking into account social activities, travel, and clubs, you blow your budget up. Okay. So this is what we suggest, right? If you're not going to build your own budget, right? We'll talk about building your own budget in the next steps. But if you're not going to build your own budget, use a number, something like $20,000 per year above the cost of attendance, right? That's what we estimate is the median person going to an MBA program spending above the cost of attendance. So if your school says 118, I want you to think something in the range of 135. Okay. So that's kind of that. The often question when people start to estimate, okay, but what about me personally? How much do I think I'm going to spend? We suggest taking a look at this because the travel is a big part of that budget, right? We've put together this data. It's the most comprehensive survey I know of for MBA travel, right? You're roughly making 9 trips a year. You're roughly spending $10,000 per year on travel. This happens the same, first year and second year, you're still doing the same kind of activity, right? So there's cost numbers, etc. It's the most comprehensive travel survey we've come across. So we encourage you to utilize that data. And John, we'll send this deck across later, right? So folks can get the links and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay.
That's correct. Yep.
Cool. Now, if you do want to build your own estimate, which is really the preferred path, we suggest using this link. It gives you a spreadsheet. There'll be various categories of expenses for you to think through, various categories of income, as well as savings for you to think through, and then you kind of come up with a number of like, okay, this is how much I'm going to spend. This is how much I might need in addition to what I have available. Now, you only do this if you have the luxury of doing it. But for those of you who are coming into school with some savings, right, we encourage you to graduate with some savings, right? So some people think, oh, I'm just going to sort of quote unquote go broke by the time I graduate. That's not a great plan. I graduated in 2020. Half my classmates had their offers rescinded as they were graduating, right? I think we all know the unemployment or employment numbers of the current graduating class. It's a lot less stressful when you have 15, 20, $30,000 in the bank account than when you graduate and you don't have any funds. Okay. Okay. And again, I recognize that's a luxury. A lot of people are not going to be able to do that, and that's okay. But if that option is available to you, please do. Okay. Let's talk about student loans, right? Because usually at the end of this exercise, folks are saying, well, I think I'm going to need some or a lot of student loans. So just from a logistics perspective, we try to break it down as once a year in the summer. So you're not taking a loan for 2 years at a time. You're just taking a loan for 1 year. And the reason is because you can't, right? Even if you wanted to take a loan for 2 years, you couldn't. You can only take a loan for 1 year. You could take it for one semester at a time, but very few people do that. Okay. So you, for that 1 year, you determine how much you want to borrow, then you figure out where you want to borrow it from, and you sort of just complete the process, right? Now, those first two statements sound simple, but they can be quite stressful. A lot of the one-on-one phone calls I have is just discussing those two first bullet points. So let's go into some of the considerations in determining how much you want to borrow. Okay. So the first thing is for those folks who are thinking, oh, I want to borrow a lot, right? The maximum you can borrow is the cost of attendance published by the school. Okay, so you're going to say, wait a second, Nikhil, you just told me I'm going to spend $15,000, $20,000 more than the cost of attendance published by the school. How does that work, right? Well, unfortunately, the answer is you have to get that $15,000, $20,000 from means other than student loans, other than scholarships, right? So it has to come from things like, I already have some amount saved. I'm going to liquidate some stocks. My parents, spouse, someone else has income or they're helping me out, right? Or I'm going to choose not to spend above the cost of attendance and I'm going to be a little bit more frugal during my MBA, program. Okay. Now, there is one thing you should consider, which is increasing the cost of attendance, right? The cost of attendance feels like this number published on the website set in stone, but it's not. You can reach out to your financial aid office and say, hey, my situation is unique. My cost of attendance is higher because of XYZ, right? Now, don't tell them travel because travel is not a good enough reason. But if you say something like, hey, I have a dependent and therefore I need to spend more, right? That's a very reasonable argument. Or, hey, I'm signing a lease over here, my rent is X, you've only budgeted for Y, can I increase it by X amount, right? Almost every school has a budget allocated for a laptop, okay? So these are ways in which you can bump up the cost of attendance and thereby borrow more if you need to borrow more, okay? Cool. So that's for folks reaching in that range, right? Now, a lot of folks, they have some stocks, they have some cash, and they're thinking about, okay, do I use this or do I not use it, right? Generally speaking, this year, what we found is most people are quote unquote in the money for not selling their stocks, right? But it's getting closer and closer to a tipping point. That's why I like to discuss it a little bit more. So first, it does depend on what interest rate you receive, right? If your interest rate is really high, sell your stocks, okay? But if it's sort of in the median, we'll discuss numbers a little bit later, it's more likely it's better off to keep your stocks, let that continue to grow, and then just borrow. And what you're doing in this situation is net worth optimization, right? You don't want to be, if you focus singularly on, oh, how much am I spending on my student loan? Obviously, the best answer is to spend, borrow as little as you can, spend all your cash, spend all your stocks. But if you take the approach of, okay, how do I maximize my net worth 4, 5, 10 years from now, right? Usually the answer becomes, okay, I want these assets to grow. I don't mind my debt growing alongside it as long as my assets are earning a good rate of return, okay? So that's the thing to consider. Cash can become stock, etc. Again, the one thing I say is don't be broke at graduation. We think of a $30,000 kind of number as reasonable savings. And to give you an understanding of the cost of that optionality, right? How much excess interest am I paying by keeping $30,000 in the bank account as cash? You are paying roughly $1,300 in interest, okay? Because your loan rate, let's say a median loan rate at Juno right now is 7.5. High yield savings, we actually, Diego, what's the interest rate we are paying on a high yield savings account? 5.25?
Correct.
5.25. So even slightly less than, $1,300 is what you're spending for that optionality of keeping cash. And if you grow this at a faster rate than 5.25, then even less. So we don't say that lightly. We understand every dollar counts, but at the same time, being broke at graduation can be a lot more expensive than $1,300. Okay. And finally, this is really where the answer becomes very clear, right? For those of you who are thinking about buying a home post-graduation in, let's say, 3 to 4 years post-graduation, right? The difference between having that down payment saved up versus starting from scratch and saving for that down payment once again can easily be 1 to 2 years, right? And a lot of post MBAs, they're buying million houses or 600K or 800K, whatever the exact number is. And national historic average appreciation is like 4%. It's been crazy in the COVID years. It's a little bit slower right now. I just use national average. 40K is just the cost of dealing 1 year. And there's no way the delta on your interest rate is going to make up for that $40,000, right? So again, if you're thinking of optimizing on your net worth, it's usually becomes hard to argue that you should spend cash. Now, if you have so much cash that you got your down payment covered, you have your emergency fund covered, it's truly excess cash above that, then that's a different discussion. Let's have a conversation. But usually in that situation, you want to minimize your loans and start using some of that cash, right? But a very, very few segment of people find themselves in that spot, right? Okay. The second thing I want to show you is sort of historic loan volume, right? Because usually there's a little bit of sticker shock that happens post-admission. It's like, oh, I got admitted. This is amazing. And then like 2 seconds later, it's like, dang, how am I going to pay for it, right? Well, this is how everyone else is paying for it. And what you can see is, the highest bar over here is the $110,000 bar, right? This is per year. So people graduating with $220,000 is like 12-13% of your class, right, is graduating with that kind of debt. And really, all the people you see in the 90K and 100K, oftentimes they've taken an additional $20,000 from the federal government that Juno doesn't see, right? And so in those cases, it's like, what, 13, I don't know, 30%, right? Call it 30% of people are borrowing basically every dollar that they can borrow from to do this. Now, what we hear about, I don't have data, otherwise they would have shown a slide. What we hear anecdotally is folks are paying off these loans in roughly 6 years post-graduation. They take a 10-year loan term. So they say, hey, I'm going to take 10 years to pay off this loan, but then they end up paying it off in 6 years. Okay. So that's just, we don't have hard data to demonstrate for that. It's just anecdotal conversations with lenders. And really how they even price your loans is based on an assumption that in 6 years, you're going to pay it off. Okay, cool. So hopefully this is just to normalize, these crazy debt amounts because, well, it's normal. All right. So this is all about loan amount, right? So we said the 2 steps you need to figure out is how much I'm going to borrow. So hopefully these discussions and thoughts help you think about how much you're going to borrow. The second question is, where are you going to borrow it from, right? And there's sort of 2 big considerations. The first biggest consideration is, do you need the protections offered by the federal loans? There is no private loan I know of that offers public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment plans, okay? So if you are in a position where you could use these post-graduation, right? Let's say you'd say, hey, I'm a MD, MBA, I'm going to go into residency, I'm not going to make a lot of money during residency, and I need income-driven repayment plans to help me through that period. That's a great reason to just take federal and forget about the rest of this discussion, okay? If you say, hey, I'm a consultant right now, I'm going to go back into consulting, and they're going to pay for some piece of it or whatever, right? I'm basically going to have a 6-figure salary and it's going to be kind of stable. Then you should be optimizing for cost, okay? And then if you're sort of in between, right? For example, I'm going to do entrepreneurship like John, and I'm going to bootstrap my company, right? And I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull a salary, right? Okay, that's certainly a thing we should have a conversation. Okay, I would encourage you to book one-on-one time with me. There's a lot that goes into that. On the flip side, if you say, I'm going to take VC backing and unless I get VC funding, I'm not interested, right? Fine, just take private because you're going to be paying yourself a salary. So, all things considered, it's like, what is my post-career goals? Does that result in a stable income that can afford to pay the student loans I take? If so, great. Let's go ahead and optimize for cost. If you need federal protections like income-driven repayment plans or public service loan forgiveness, take federal because there's no one else who's going to give you those protections, okay? Now, within private, I'm going to kind of intermix Juno and private, mainly because there is no better option than Juno in the private market, right? And I'll explain why that is the case, but for now, just take it take my word on it, right? From a cost perspective, this is how it breaks down, right? And some places do not have these numbers updated. These numbers apply for fall 2024 and spring 2025, right? Including government websites will give you different numbers. They are wrong. Okay. If you read the fine print next to the incorrect numbers, it will often have an outdated date associated with it. For fall 2024 and spring 2025, the numbers you see on the screen are the numbers. Okay. So the federal unsubsidized loan, you can borrow 20,500. You can't borrow more than that. And you get an 8.08% interest rate. It has a small origination fee of 1%. The grad plus loans is what you use if you need above 20,500 from the federal government. That has a 9.08% interest rate and a very heavy sort of 4.2% origination fee. What we expect for the median and really a very large chunk of the median, around the median Juno members, is to get a rate that's below the unsubsidized loans. Okay. And then some people might get a rate in between. Almost no one will get a rate above. It's usually you'll just get declined before you get a rate that's effectively above the grad plus rate. Okay. So that this kind of summarizes that, right? Now the underwriting is not purely based on FICO. So if this doesn't happen to you, don't come to me and say like, hey, my FICO is 731 and I didn't get, a rate below 8.08. It's not, this is just guidelines. But for most members, most of our members have a FICO above 730. And if that's you, we're expecting you to get a rate below the, basically Juno is going to be your cheapest option. If it's above, if your FICO is above 730, yeah, Juno is the best deal. If your FICO is below 730, we don't really know, but there's still a pretty good chance it's below the grad plus loans, right? So you would take your first 20,500 from the federal and rest Juno, versus if your credit is above 730, you're just going to go Juno all the way. Cool. And there's a special deal for Texas, which is just like so amazing. I can't give you rates and stuff over here, but like if you're in Texas and you're not using Juno, you're making a big mistake. You're leaving there are people, I kid you not, there are people who have way too much cash, right? And they're like, I'm just going to borrow every dollar I can from this Texas deal because the interest rate is lower than the high yield savings account, right? So they're getting rates less than like 5%, 4%. And they max out the loan, put the money in a savings account, and they're like, I'm making money just by taking a loan, right? So it's kind of crazy, but if you're in Texas, you have to use Juno pretty much. It's free money. Okay, cool. So just to go over that again, if you need public service loan forgiveness, if you need income-driven repayment, go federal. Otherwise, check your rates and take whichever is cheaper. If Juno is not cheaper, give me a call because something's wrong. The other thing is, how do you, when people start comparing grad plus rates to interest, any private loan, right? You often see the situation where you're looking at a 9.08 interest rate. The private loan doesn't have origination fee, but the federal loan has a 4.2% origination fee. So it's like, what's the effective rate, right? And because the origination fee is charged up front, no one can tell you what the effective rate is because it depends on how long you take to pay off the loan, right? But this is some guidelines, right? If you're going to take 10 years to pay off the loan, the effective rate is something like 10%. If you're going to refinance right around graduation, which is quite common, and really for the incoming class right now, I expect everyone to do it. Because if you think about it, you're entering a declining rate environment. So when you graduate, you're going to get the benefit of A, the declining rate environment, and B, you get a risk premium reduction because you've already graduated and you have a job. Okay. So both of those factors combined, lets you refinance at a lower rate. Just as my own example, I borrowed at like 5 something, different interest rate environment back then. I borrowed at 5 something for my school. I refinanced into a 2.8% after graduation. Okay. So that's, not atypical. So yeah, so point is this should help you compare, and largely if you're seeing a situation where you're not getting a rate better than the grad plus, send us a note because we feel like something's off. Okay, cool. So yeah, same thing again and again. Now, there's a lot to think about on repayment of your student loans, right? So far, everything we've spoken about is about which loan should I take right now, which one's better for me, etc., right? Which all makes sense. But before you finalize your loan, you should think about paying back your loan also and how you're going to do that. Okay. And that's where this comes in. So when you take a federal loan, you're going to take a 10-year repayment plan because that's just what the federal says it's going to be. It's going to be what's called a fully deferred repayment plan, which means you're not going to make any payments while you're in school. You're not going to make any payments for 6 months after graduation. And after that, you'll make equal monthly payments for 10 years. Okay. And then you're going to take a fixed interest rate loan. That's what the federal option is. That is also coincidentally the most popular option on the private student loans, right? So the most common option again is 10 years, fully deferred, fixed. I personally think that's a mistake. I suggest people take on $25 per month while they are in school. And the reason I suggest that is because it allows you to access what's called an auto pay discount that reduces your interest rate by 0.25% while you're in school. You would still get this auto pay discount after school if you took the deferred repayment plan, but you wouldn't get it while you're in school on the deferred repayment plan. So that's why I suggest if you can manage it, spend $25 per month on the loan. It's not a fee. The $25 per month is not a fee. It goes towards the interest that's accruing. But it's just, you're making those payments while you're in school. Okay. The interest only and the immediate repayment plans is rarely used. Oftentimes you won't even see it in your options. If you're applying with a cosigner, you're more likely to see it. If you're applying without a cosigner, which 66% of our members apply without a cosigner, you often don't even see those options. Okay. But they're basically, you're making larger payments while you're in school. And that's up to you if you can sign up for that. You do get a lower interest rate usually if you commit to that, but it's a big commitment, right? Okay. A quick note on variable for those who are extra savvy. I get this question a lot where people say, hey, I want to take a variable rate loan because rates are going to be coming down soon, so I want to ride that curve down. Well, the only problem with that is the banks are one step ahead of you. And if you compare your fixed rate and your variable rate, oftentimes the variable rate is higher because even the banks are expecting the rates to come down, right? So unless you have some secret information that tells you, hey, the rates are going to come down a lot, crashing down a lot more than the banks are expecting it to come down, just stick with the fixed. And from the data, everyone is taking fixed right now, right? Like virtually no one is taking variable. Okay, so that's that. Selecting a loan term, like I said, 10 is the most popular. You do get some interest rate reduction for choosing a smaller loan term. The example I've given here is an exaggeration. The rates won't change that much, but only sign up for it if you're comfortable with the monthly payment. Okay. So yeah, we spoke about this. If you want to go the same as the federal, you'll take a 10 years fixed, fully deferred. If you want to get your auto pay discount sooner, you'll take 10 years fixed, $25 per month, right? We already spoke about this. So this is just to put it in a timeline kind of graph, just so that it's a little bit easier to understand, right? So if you start school in August and you're in school till May, you graduate, and then 6 to 9 months, depending on which lender. The biggest lender we are partnering with this year will do 9 months. So somewhere in Feb 2027 is the first full equal monthly payments that you have to make, right? And the 10-year clock really starts at this point of time. So that's, this is the most typical arrangement we'll see, right? And during this deferment period, you might make $0 monthly payments, you might pay $25 per month, or you might make a full interest-only payment during the deferment period. Okay. Now, what we suggest, look, Juno's deal for this year literally launched last week. Okay. And when we launched the deal, we have the tightest control on the rates that are offered to our members. Because the way these deals are structured is we put caps on what the lenders can offer our members, but we allow the lenders some flexibility on those caps as market conditions might get worse, right? So what you want to do is lock the rates in for yourself, right, as soon as you can. And I'll talk a little bit about why it makes sense to do this, right? There's pretty much no downside. When you go secure your rate, you're basically locking the lender into a commitment on their side to give you a loan at that rate. But you are not committed to taking that loan until pretty much the disbursement occurs, right? So the way it works is this. If you're approved on the lender side, not on Juno's side, okay? If you go all the way to the lender side through Juno and you see your rates on the lender side, that usually means you have 30 days to decide whether you want that loan or not, okay? And let's say you go a step further, you sign the loan, you say, yes, I want this loan, okay? Even then, until the disbursement occurs on a date set by you by your university, so it's different for everyone. I can't tell you what the date is, but usually it's pretty close to your tuition due date, okay? So until that point, you can just call up the lender and say, hey, I don't want this loan any longer. It's one phone call. It's not, they don't make you dance around, and the loan is canceled. There's no penalties, there's no costs, there's nothing, right? So it's a free option is the way I look at it, right? Lock them in right now, make sure you have your rate secured while we have the lenders, pretty controlled on the rates, and then you're set. Okay. This is an example from, go ahead. Yeah.
Might be worth touching base. I'm seeing a few questions on accurate interests and how does that compare with the federal options. So I guess it's worth for you to mention that.
Yes, this is a great slide to mention that. Federal loans and private loans for graduate students in terms of interest accrual work exactly the same. All federal loans, both the unsubsidized loan and the Grad Plus loan, and as well as private loans, as the funds are dispersed, interest will begin to accrue. And then depending on your repayment plan, you'll start making payments. But interest begins to accrue on all of these loans as soon as the disbursement occurs. Now, you might go on the web and you'll find information about how federal loans don't accrue interest while you are in school. That applies to undergraduate students who qualify for the federal subsidized loan. For graduate students, no such options exist. I'm sorry, don't shoot the messenger, but it just does not exist. Okay. Does that address the questions, Diego? Awesome. All right. So this is another example of just me encouraging you to lock in rates. This is what happened in 2022, right? We locked in the lender under 5%. Okay. And by the end of the season, because of all the federal rate hikes, our members were getting rates in the 7% range, right? And, I couldn't do anything about it, right? Because obviously we have to give some flexibility to the lenders if the market erodes, right? And if the market erodes, this year there's talks about stagflation, etc. Generally, we don't expect anything this crazy to happen, but Jerome Powell will do what Jerome Powell does, and if he makes certain decisions, all bets are off. So again, we just encourage you to go lock down the rates. You can always change your mind later until disbursement occurs, but just lock in what you can right now. All right. And so, yeah.
Sorry, on one question on that, just so I understand. You can, so these folks can just go sign up for Juno, see what the rate is, compare it to other options, and then they can lock in the lowest rate. And then they can decide, if rates go down or whatever, they can kind of see it. And
yeah, let's talk about that. If let's say rates go down, right? You lock in a rate today and tomorrow rates go down, great. Just come back, do a new rate check, right? You'll get a new rate that's hopefully lower. Cancel your old loan, sign the new one. No one is stopping you from doing it. I will literally walk you through the process on Zoom one-on-one. I've done this like so many times. So no problem at all. Great question, John. And which is kind of the point of this slide, right? Basically saying there is ability for you to change things. As things progress, that ability goes down, right? But generally speaking, let's say even the loan disperses, right? And you decide, I don't need this much money anymore. You can log into the lender's website, prepay the loan. There's no prepayment penalties. So the only thing it's costed you is any interest that accrued during the time you had the money, right? And that's kind of it. And I think that's pretty fair, right? If you have the funds, you should be paying interest on it. Okay, I think that's kind of, should we skip to Q&A? Okay, 30 days to shop around. So that's the other thing. We encourage you to shop around. Oh, we don't have a rate match guarantee slide. Oh my God, I forgot. Okay, so one thing that's not on the slide is Juno's rate match guarantee. What that means is we are so confident that if you find a lower rate outside of Juno, just come tell us about it. We'll do two things. A, we'll give you that rate that you found outside of Juno, comparing apples to apples, same loan term, same blah, 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 right? We'll give you that same rate. On top of that, we'll send you a check for 1% of the loan amount, right? And that's coming from Juno. And, we know what we've negotiated, and we don't expect our graduate students to really have any other option that's better than Juno.
I remember
yeah.
one thing I would add. Also, if you haven't signed up for the giveaway, definitely do that because we're going to announce the winner here in just a minute. So make sure we'll drop the link again in the chat. We've gotten DM'd a couple times. Make sure it's $500. You have the chance to win. Your odds are decent. There's 150 people on this call. Second thing is one thing that Nikhil mentioned to me the other day that I thought was really cool was that there was a certain school where there was like a local credit union that just had this like crazy unique situation where they could get better loans, and Juno like told their customers that like, go get this loan, it's better. So I think that there's a lot that you guys do to build trust, which is sweet. And I think
John, there's an update to that. There's an update to that.
Oh, let's hear it.
So what we convince the lender to do is match those rates. So today, that credit union, so there's a few of
negotiate.
Yeah, exactly. The credit union helped us negotiate. So right now, if you're, it depends on which school. There's still one school hanging out there. It's actually alma mater, John. But for every other school, including HBS, including Kellogg, we will beat the rates offered by your school or your school affiliated credit union, etc. And this year, we don't even ask you to apply to the school's credit union. We just say, you are an HBS student, therefore your rates get capped at the same rates offered by your credit union. So if you get a lower rate from Juno, great, take the lower rate. If you get a higher rate from Juno, we will automatically dock it down to the credit union rates. So not yet done for Stanford, but we are working on it.
I love it. I love it.
Amazing. Okay. John, what do you want to do? Do you want to take questions? Do you want to
Yeah, I think maybe we'll give you your last 5 minutes, folks, to fill out the form if you haven't already. It looks like most of you have already done it, but and let's just do some Q&A. I think that would yeah, it's super helpful.
Awesome.
If you guys, yeah, Diego, if you want to field questions and pass them along to Nikhil, you guys are welcome to drop them in the chat or whatever's most helpful.
I see.
Yeah.
I want to answer.
You want to go ahead, Nikhil?
Yeah, the McCombs question, right? Like, yes, 100% McCombs is a big sort of target school for Juno, and McCombs also falls in Texas. So again, this is the deal for Texas, right? It is just phenomenal, right? I could go back to school for this because I'm going to make money taking their loan, right? Yeah. INSEAD, yes, we do. We are actually on the INSEAD website, right? Are we not on the INSEAD website? Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
INSEAD will tell you to come to Juno. So yes,
I think it's important to know that here, Nikhil, that we also work with students going outside of the US to different schools that are not in the US. We can also help them out.
Yep. If you're a US citizen or a US permanent resident going abroad for your education, we've got you. Yep. So Diego, I'll let you fire away with the questions.
Yeah, one question that we do get a lot of is sort of like some schools being need-based for fellowships, some being merit-based, how to navigate that process. I know this is outside of the world of Juno, but you probably get a lot of insight into it if you want to.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot. So need-based, it's really true for both, right? But you want to appeal to the school based on the arguments they want to hear, right? This sounds a little bit obvious, but like if you're going to a need-based program, email the school and tell them, hey, my need exists for XYZ reason, right? And it's kind of weird. Like, so this is my personal situation at HBS, a need-based program, right? I got X dollars in financial aid. I emailed them saying, hey, I know as part of the application process, I shared my parents' tax returns. And on that tax return, there was a substantial income shown. However, this income is not something that reoccurs for my parents. It was a one-time thing. It was basically a liquidation of a stock portfolio, right? And I explained that to them. They gave me an additional $10,000 in um, aid, right? So you want to make, need-based arguments to programs that are making need-based determinations. The other thing you want to state is the presence of scholarships from a different program, right? Some people shy away from saying that, and I understand it's tough to say it, but in today's world of ChatGPT, you don't have to worry about it, right? You explain the situation to ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to write a polite email that you can send to the school that says, hey, I have X amount of aid from Y school. Can you make my decision easier by increasing, the aid from your school, right? So those are sort of my highest level tips on that topic, John. Basically is,
I think
and the last tip on that is, we believe, I'm not an adcom, right? But we believe there is a budget for yield protection, right? And you can look up yield protection, etc. But so once again, that's why I think mentioning the other school sometimes works. And as long as you're polite about it, it's not like they're going to rescind your admissions offer, right? It's just a discussion.
Yeah, yeah. To interpret that, like they want you to go to their school once you're admitted. So use that. I had actually, even in my situation, we had one child and had just found out that we were having a second and that they were going to be born during the first semester, and they actually updated our need-based calculation to give us more because we're having another child. So if there's other things that come up, just start having a lot of kids. That's their best. I'm just joking. Don't do that. It's certainly more expensive to do that than to just pay a little bit more. And then in terms of the merit-based scholarships or fellowships, it's typically school by school and how it works, but you can apply for those as well. So for those of you asking in the chat.
Nikhil, I think there's a question that you should address. They're asking if executive programs and online programs are eligible under our deal. So I think it's worth noting that they are.
Yes, 100%. So exec programs across the board should be eligible. Online programs is a hit or miss. It kind of depends on how your school classifies it. If the school classifies it as, sort of a degree granting program, it's usually eligible. And the main criteria is enrolled at least half time. Okay, not full time, at least half time. So as long as that's true, you usually qualify for the loans, right? Okay.
Yeah. I think final question would be about timeline. There's a couple of them asking here if they get accepted late, if they're still like on time to get a loan. I guess if we can talk about how fast they can get approved for a loan, I think that would be helpful.
Look, I hesitate to answer this question because it's actually pretty fast, right? But what we suggest is 1 month before your tuition due date is the latest you should be starting your application. Obviously, you saw the slides I presented, try to do it as fast as possible. Now, that being said, you're in a time crunch, whatever, you had to wait for some reason. We can get a loan dispersed to the school in roughly 5 to 7 business days, right? From the time you apply to money in the school, like 5 to 7 business days. And really all the work that you personally have to do, you can finish in one session in about 25, 30 minutes when you're applying without a cosigner. If you're applying with a cosigner, maybe a little bit longer, like 2 to 3 business days. So that's just how that is.
I had one more question that I got a DM on that I think would be interesting. Someone asked if federal and Juno loans taken out are reported to the school and they impact how much, financial aid that you.
Yeah, there's no getting around that financial aid limit of the cost of attendance. I wish I had a formula for that. Unfortunately, I do not. It is kind of what it is, right? You have to all these loans, the way they work is the money gets sent to the school. Okay, so actually, when you sign the loan, let's say you apply for $250,000, right? And you'll get approved, right? The lender might approve you for $250,000. You sign the loan, you'll feel like, oh, I'm about to get $250,000. Then the next step that happens is the lender and the school talk to each other to figure out the disbursement schedule. And during that time, the loan amount is going to come up and it's going to be like, wait a second, that loan amount is too big. And the school will knock it down to the cost of attendance minus any scholarships you've received. And that's how you'll get a notice. It's called a final disclosure. And the final disclosure will have a smaller loan amount than what you signed off on previously. Okay. So there's no working the system. The money gets sent to the school before it gets sent to you. All the funds go to the school. The school takes its tuition fees, health insurance, whatever. And then the remaining amount the school sends to your checking account, right? So there really is no getting around that system. I know all the hacks, trust me. There is no hack.
Yeah, they've got it kind of dialed. It seems like they used to check only your income or your savings, I guess. And so people would go buy a car or a house before they go to school, and they now check a lot of that stuff when they're calculating need based and other things. So yeah, they've got it kind of dialed. Great.
I see a question here about if your rate is lower from a private lender, then Juno is providing. Who do I reach out to get the match? Easy, just send a note to hello@joinjuno.com. What we're going to ask you is for sort of proof of that other offer, and then we'll do the rest, give you the 1%, etc. Okay.
Great. Should we announce the scholarship winner?
Let's do it. I feel
Yeah,
like we need fanfare.
do you want to do it, Nikhil? Who wants to do it?
I think we should have John do it.
I don't have the name. You got
I'll DM it to you, John.
All right. All right. This is
I'm ready with confetti.
We got
You have it, John.
people. Okay, the winner is Ashley Williams. So congrats to you, Ashley. We'll reach out and make sure you get that scholarship. Congrats, Ashley. And yeah, hopefully this has been helpful, guys. This is great, Nikhil. I feel like every time we do these, I learn things that I wish I knew when I was going to my MBA program. So big thank you to you guys, and appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. We couldn't do this without you. Really appreciate the time.